everybody, welcome to Jackie's Journey.
Hello.
So this is video 16. What are we going to talk about for 16, Hannah?
When you met Dad, you were a new believer. You were just starting out in the church. You weren't raised in the church. You had a little bit of familiarity with the church from experiences as a kid with friends, but you really didn't know about church. You didn't know about God. You didn't know about being a believer. And so when you met Dad and you were raising children, that was your first that was your first introduction to church.
Right.
And as a new believer, you have this thought that everything that is being said in the pulpit, everything that you're learning is something that needs to be applied to your life 100%. It's the way of life. But in raising us, and something that I've realized and noticed and learned, is that just because it's said doesn't mean it's 100% true.
Right.
It isn't 100% how you are supposed to. You're not supposed to take it for face value. You're supposed to hear it, digest it, and interpret it in the way that you seem fit. How did you do that?
As a new believer, I think, as video 15 illustrates, I was eager to meet and learn about God as I had grown to know Him. And that was through the experience of when I was very young, when my Nana died, and I was told that she was in heaven. And so I knew that God and heaven were one and the same for the most part. And so I wanted to make sure that I learned about God and heaven and how to get there. So I took it to the extreme, I think, but I also applied it at a time that was convenient, because when I was in the reserves, I had met this new group of people, this new church, and this new way of living. And the things that were happening in my life, it just felt like that fit. And that was a progressive point in my life. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to church on the Sabbath and you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, then I guess it's time for me to leave the reserves. And I did. Now, fast forward to what you just said and raising children, I wasn't quite as zealous, I guess, as some would refer that to. In other words, when you hear somebody say, sit down, stand up, roll over, you sit down, stand up, and roll over, and you don't give it any thought. But what you're saying is, when you hear someone say, sit down, stand up, roll over, you say to yourself, is this a good place to stand up, or is there a crack in the floor that I'm standing on and I could fall? Is this the best time to roll over? Or if I roll over, I'm going to roll off the edge of a 40-foot ledge, and determine maybe it's not necessarily the way it's said for every person in the room. Mm-hmm. And you have to find the message that is meant by those words. And maybe the rolling over is actually the point that you are of considering this type of job or that type of job. It's time to transition from going there to there and applying it to your given situation. Mm-hmm. If that's explained clearly, I hope. But that's what I grew into. It didn't happen at first, but as I started having children, I realized that the way I teach my children, they will one day be adults. And I'm responsible as a human being first to make sure that I teach them the things that I think will be of value to them when they're older, and things that they will be able to stand up on their own 2 feet and be able to make the decisions needed when the time comes and I'm not necessarily there, or somebody's not there to assist them in that decision making. There was a difference. There was like you've illustrated, a difference in just taking things for face value and taking things and then applying them after, searching within yourself where they should be applied.
So that was something you learned over time through experience, being in the church and experiencing and probably observing how things were going. I mean, I'm sure there were many experiences, and just with family, and because our church growing up, it was very family. It was
Right.
It was built on the family.
Right.
Our pastor was our grandmother.
Right.
Our assistant pastors were our dad and uncles and
Right.
aunts and leaders of worship, and the accounting or treasury side of things. It was all family, and
Right.
seeing them and watching them, I mean, it really it teaches you, wait a second, there's two sides
Right.
to everything, and with some things there's more than two.
Right.
And if you just take what's being said and accept it as if it were gold and the only way of life, where does that leave you?
Right. Well, number one, it makes you very dependent.
Yeah.
It makes you rely heavily on the one or two or three that are behind the microphone. And that can become dangerous.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, within yourself, decide, is this actually applying to me in my life now because it's like divine intervention, or is it because there was a conversation that happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 hours ago
Yeah.
that is infiltrating into this message, and what are the roots behind it? And that was a fine line, and that was not a popular fine line to cross.
Yeah.
And I crossed it many times, and eventually I crossed it to the point where I was no longer going to the family church, and that was not a popular time for me in my life. I was not a popular person then.
Mm-hmm.
But as time goes on, I learned that at this point in my life, teaching my children to be nice people and responsible people and people that will be able to stand on their own 2 feet was more important to me than making sure that everyone around me was happy with my decision. Mm-hmm. And that I refer to a time in my life when I said, I will no longer be a pleaser. I will not goal orient myself to make everyone around me pleased with my decision.
Yeah.
Not a popular place
That's
to
very
be.
hard. Yeah.
Not at all. But I learned it. It was hard, but I learned it, and the reward for that is great. And I've come across people throughout my journey that struggle with being what I refer to as a people pleaser. And I know they're struggling because I struggled with it at one time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted everyone to be happy with my decision. I wanted to please everybody. You can't please everybody.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to be able to stand up. And it doesn't mean that you offend people. It doesn't mean that you're disrespectful or
Yeah.
discourteous. It just means that if it's time to say no, you say no.
Yeah.
And some people have a very hard time with that. There you have it.
Yeah. And it's very evident that this was something that you really were working towards when you were raising us, because I mean, if you look at us, your 5 children, all of us, on a spectrum, it can either be extreme or it can be, the opposite end. We all buck the system in a little bit of a way. We all take things, we hear them, we apply them, and we interpret them in the manner that we see fit, or the way that makes sense to us. And it can either be where, everything is a conspiracy, or, okay, what you said makes sense, I'm going to apply it to my life and logically deal with it the way I think and what makes me feel comfortable. And we all do that.
Right.
Every single last one of us. And I mean, growing up in school, everyone knew that, those are the Walker kids. I remember all the time, like even after I left high school and I would go, when I worked and did substituting and I went back, everyone still knew, you're a Walker kid, your brother, we have your brother, or we have your sister, or it was just, we made a name for ourselves because we lived our life the way she taught us.
Yeah, it's hard to put in words what we're trying to describe, and hopefully this is probably going to be a video that will stem a lot of questions, because the journey, there's lots more to the journey. Some is not easily described, but I feel that it's important because it's a significant part of the journey. And right now, I'm in Abu Dhabi. And how did I, a single mother with 5 children living in a 500 square foot house, end up in Abu Dhabi with my firstborn? That's why I'm doing this, because the journey has a lot of twists and turns, and we're getting into some of the twistier segments. So without going too long on this video, we're going to say farewell. Ask your questions, but enjoy the view. We're going to give you some of the views that we're enjoying right now. And what you hear is prayer time at the mosque. This is the second largest mosque in the world, second only to Mecca, and they are calling to prayer right now because it's Ramadan, and they call to prayer anyway, but right now is a very special time for our Muslim friends. So anyway, thanks for joining, and don't forget to hit like.
Give this video a big thumbs up.
That means a lot, and subscribe. And if you don't know how to subscribe and see all 16 now videos, let us know and we'll help you. But thanks for joining us on the journey, and we'll see you on the next video, number 17.
Bye.
Bye.